Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to give you our first look at some of the Holy Priest gameplay for 10.2. This is with the new tier set bonuses, and of course, since they don't have Mythic Plus out yet to test onto the PTR, we did about the next best thing, which is Proving Grounds. Of course, there is some issues, of course, by doing Proving Grounds, since it is just going to be mainly single target healing onto your tank, but that also kind of worked really well because that's what a lot of the changes have been coming around to be. One of the biggest things that they had coming in with Holy Priest, like we mentioned in our prior video, is that both Flash Heal and Serenity output got increased, which is excellent for really keys and raids. So what I want to do in this video is talk about some of the experiences that we had thus far with Proving Grounds and the tier set testing, what I like about Holy Priest, what some of the M+ problems exist for the spec, and what some of the raid problems I think exist for it as well. Starting it off, like I said, spot healing is getting increased, which is great, and it helped a lot, of course, when I'm doing Proving Grounds, which is just bombing your tank 70% of the time. But I really do enjoy so far what we see out of this like proc gameplay from the set bonus, where your renew gives you free holy words, and it doesn't reset the cooldown of them, but just the next time that you would spend a charge, it is 50% cheaper, and it doesn't actually cost that charge. So that actually helps quite a bit. It was pretty noticeable, of course, not having a lot of like perf mending bouncing when it was coming to Proving Grounds, but they're going to happen a lot when it's coming into keys and raid, and allow you to be able to just generally generate a lot more of those holy words. And by doing so, you're naturally going to be spreading around renew, because hitting Serenity is giving you long-lasting renew on your main target, and Sanctify is of course hitting 5-second renews onto all the allies hit by it. So in a general sense, I like how this is going to give options for more skill expression with the spec by getting those free renews out by using your holy words, which feeds into free holy words being able to be cast, and then also playing with this gameplay around Epiphany, which is of course whenever you cast a holy word, you have a chance to reset the cooldown of Prayer of Mending. Usually in raids today, I kind of wait on a holy word unless, you know, there's some burst damage that I need to use it right away. But if I can, I try to make sure that I hit my Prayer of Mending, hit any holy words I pooled up, try to game resets out of it, and if it's like 3 or 4 seconds for Prayer of Mending to come back, then I'll kind of hold off on a holy word use to try to game it a little bit further. And I think this sort of elevates it to the next level. But not all is going to be perfect, and we'll talk about some of that when it comes to the raid perspective. From a Mythic Plus perspective, the problem with this tier set is that it's just kind of weak. I even went to the point where I was just like blanketing renews just to like see how quickly it was going to proc for me. And I think over the course of the Proving Grounds, with 5 targets being renewed fairly frequently, especially when I was using lots of Sanctifies, even when they overhealed, I was not getting a lot of procs. And so at the moment, it feels like this tier set's quite bad for a Mythic Plus environment, but it's not quite the end of the world if they're bringing up the rest of the kit to be able to make the 5-man setup better. Having really heavy focus on like Prayer of Mending output from the Aberis tier set was actually quite strong, giving you a lot of extra holy words, but you still kind of just felt like you were at this point where you're just massing the Flash Heal button in higher keys, hoping it was going to be enough to be able to keep your allies alive. So if they're just bringing up the overall talent kit, that'll work out fine, but only having Renew and Flash Heal and not really adding any sort of buffs to some of the specific talents in Holy Priest's builds, noticeably things like Trail of Light, or I forget the name of the talent, but it increased the crit strike chance of Flash Heal and Heal, or Light Weaver, not really receiving any buffs is extremely strange to me. I would really be surprised if Heal never got a baseline buff. I think it really needs one at the moment to be able to actually build out another talent set, because it feels like a lot of your capstones is like just, hey, take Divine Image and take Miracle Worker and just go from there and have a blast, right? Unfortunately, since a lot of your AoE output is based in Sanctify, or in a raiding environment, you're casting Prayer of Healing, which doesn't do a lot of output, to get more Sanctify, which is doing all the AoE output. Can't really work that way in a Mythic Plus environment, especially if people are spread, and so you're just kind of stuck in this whack-a-mole type fashion. But there still needs to be more support for that whack-a-mole fashion to begin with. And that, I think, is really where some of the concern that I have for Mythic Plus Holy Priest in Season 3 is going to come around, is that we have to be in this way of life, basically. And it seems like Lightweaver, Divine Word are kind of a little underwhelming at the moment, and really should be looked at to be able to get some larger attention going forward. Survivability, of course, is still going to be a major concern. That's never really been Holy Priest's forte. And Angel's Mercy, which would reset the cooldown of Desperate Prayer based off the damage you take, has now gotten nerfed to just flat Desperate Prayer cooldown reduction. And that also is going to impact our survivability quite a bit as well. Renewed Faith is where targets that already have your renew on them are going to be getting more healing. And like, that's a 7 or 8% in terms of increased healing, which is okay, but you're not really going to be casting lots of renew. Maybe you could cast it in between trash packs if you really wanted to like sweat it up, but you're not getting into this gameplay where you're just going to be mashing renew all the time. It still does not do a lot of healing on its own, and it's not giving you your holy words, which is the whole basis really of your spec in raids and M+. But specifically for Mythic Plus, you have a lot of issues. Like one of them, not subscribing to the YouTube channel to be up to date with all our content. But also, Holy Priest just doesn't have a kick for some reason still. And we're going to be going into a pretty kick-heavy season with dungeons like Waycrest Manor and Throne of the Tides having a pretty solid amount of kicks in general, at least from what we've seen so far. And that could be really debilitating for one of 2 specs in the entire game that do not have an interrupt. Couple that with nerf Mass Dispel, Power Infusion being nerfed, and there's not as much value when it comes to Mind Soothe. There's a lot of non-humanoid mobs in these upcoming dungeons. There's a lot of elites, which probably are going to get added into True Sight as well to prevent Mind Soothe skips going forward. And they did nerf down Symbol of Hope, which we'll talk about in the raid section as well. So Priest really, I think, deeply needs a kick for this incoming season, even if it's going to be like a 45-second kick. When it comes to a raiding environment, of course, there are a couple of the nerfs that are coming into play, notably for Salvation's cooldown reduction. Now, early on, I didn't think that this was going to be too big of a deal, but giving some more thought and getting some experience with the new tier set from PTR so far, I do think it's an over-the-top nerf because of how the new 2 and 4 set really is going to be interacting, right? I do think that there needs to be some way to sort of rein in the power of Salvation to the point where people are getting like ridiculously, insanely fast, like 3.5 minute Salvation cooldown, which didn't really seem to be the intention of a 12-minute cooldown, right? And you still want the ability to be strong because you don't want them to water down Salvation so it's not strong, but you just have it all the time, right? Because the synergy of activating Salvation, force proccing Apotheosis from answered prayers in a raid. The problem is now you get your 4-piece on top of that, where you're activating Apotheosis once you cast Salvation because you have all the Prayer of Mendings out, and your 4-piece means that all those renews that you're also putting out onto all the players are going to be giving you the new Holy Word generation, those free Holy Words that are not incurring a charge, but they're going to be half off. But you're also going to have free Holy Words from Apotheosis, and usually when you have that Apotheosis, the priority that you have for Apotheosis is first to generate new Holy Words so that you'd be able to get Salvation back faster, and that's especially going to be the case when they nerf the amount of cooldown reduction that you're able to put into Salvation to begin with. It's nice to have free Holy Words when Apotheosis is up, but it's even better to be able to get new Holy Words that are doing crazy amounts of healing and top it off with Serenity getting stronger. Sanctify, while it's nerfed, is still incredibly strong, but when you are also getting that pressure to be able to spend the free procs you're getting out of your new force set, there's just too much overload and like an overstress in one specific window of time to get a lot of value. And then in other areas, you're kind of just, okay, I have a free proc every once in a while and it feels good. It's very, very like sort of like a high stress area where you have 2 buffs that sort of like water each other down at the exact same time. And that's why I feel like going from the old 2 and 4 set with lots of Prayer of Mendings, kind of just a downgrade as we're going into the new setup, because Aberis was pretty much just like pure synergy, having your Prayer of Mendings bouncing all over the place all the time and giving you even more Apotheosis uptime and really good synergy with playing around Epiphany. You still have that, but I do think that this 4 set could find some kind of way to be able to, I don't know, maybe make it so that the cap is going to be larger, so you're able to build up a larger pool of those free Holy Words with Salvation, so you don't have as much pressure to spend them right away. That might be nice, because you only have a cap of 2, so that could feel really, really bad if you just overcap because you have Salvation ticking all these renews on 20-something players, and then you're just not able to spend them fast enough. That could be kind of a pain, but I hope that's something that they start thinking about or of addressing, so that there's not this conflict between your answered prayers apotheosis and the new 4-set procs for casting as many holy words as you have at once. Because the other thing to think about is you also have to be, or you want to be, playing around Epiphany in a raid to be able to get even more Mendings out, which feeds the feedback loop of giving you more apotheosis, which could then feed the feedback loop of having more renews, and so on. So there's a number of things that sort of come to a head when you already cast Salvation that you don't want to have any sort of conflicts when it comes to your tier set. You want to just have continued synergy, everything flowing downstream together. It's not the end of the world, but I do think that they could have this as an area that they think about if they're going to make any sort of changes to make sure that everything is going to flow smoothly. A Symbol of Hope, as I had mentioned, did end up getting nerfed from 60 seconds to 40 seconds. I actually don't think this is the end of the world. The symbol got nerfed in addition to Powered Barrier for Disc Priests. I think this is actually kind of fine, particularly for a raiding environment, because Symbol has been really powerful for a while, and players' defensives are really powerful the more bursty that incoming damage is. And so as a result, you have, the best guilds in the world using all their defensives for an incoming event, hitting Symbol, getting it back for the next event. And a lot of times there's kind of like a delay between those two events. And usually people are preemptively popping their defenses before the damage happens. So you might use all your defensives right after the first breath that you get out of Sarkareth to clear your debuffs in phase 1, and then you hit Symbol, and then you're going to be able to have it back for like the Glitter Surge at the end of the fight or something along those lines, because there's usually 20-30 seconds or some sort of time delay between the first time you use your defensive, then getting Symbol, and then the next time you need to use your defensive. So a lot of times most specs in the game with a 1.5 or 2-minute cooldowns are getting those cooldowns back anyway, and they're just kind of sitting there. So I don't think this is some massive impact, and I think Symbol is still really good. Although it is kind of a pain in the ass that it's still missing mana with Symbol of Hope, and they nerfed that a little bit too. So I'm pretty hopeful for Holy Priest, and I don't want to be a downer on where the spec stands by any means. I just want to be able to highlight some of the potential issues that they have so far that can be addressed immediately before raid testing happens, or something to think about as raid testing goes on. Because I do expect a lot of changes across the board for many different healers, and making sure a tier set feels good, flows well, is going to be chief among their priorities, or at least I think it should be. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch y'all next time.